G'day guys and gal. Everyone loves a good last stand. Tom Cruise's Last Samurai, the 300 Spartans, Saving Private Ryan. Nothing gets my juices flowing than some badass dudes giving their final effort in lives to create some awesome cinematic content. So it's pretty sweet that Warhammer 40k is absolutely chockers with last stands, and extremely awesome ones at that. What really sets Warhammer's last stands above the rest is that it involves super soldiers, parasitic space bugs of death, angry sentient mushroom men, and a plethora of other spicy combatants. I didn't see anyone get cut in half by a chain axe in Saving Private Ryan. Before we get started, I'm going to keep this short and simple because that's all it needs. Visible abs, a thin face, stable hormones, and just being happy is mostly dependent on what you eat. But unless you're a chef with a bunch of spare time, you are either ordering greasy food, spending bulk cash at restaurants, or cooking pretty mid meals. But it doesn't have to be like that. Factor saves you time and money while being delicious and healthy by providing you with a large range of high protein microwave meals. I know this sounds a bit too good to be true, but it's not. Factor meals are never frozen, so you don't get that dry, dull, soggy taste that is common with these kind of meals. The best part is that every week you get new meals, so you'll never get sick of having the same thing over and over. Plus with macros like this, you can have a bodybuilder's dream diet without all the meal prep or weighed food nonsense that no sane person can actually be stuffed doing. There is no way Factor doesn't change your life for the better, so to start changing your waistline and the Warhammer stereotype, then use my link below or code POGMAJORJUN50. That's POG Major JUN 50 for 50% off your first box. With such a great discount, there is no reason not to at least give it a go. I guarantee you won't regret it. Cheers to Factor for sponsoring this video. Today I'll go over the top 5 last stands in Warhammer 40k. Yep, that's all there really is to it. Now let's get into it. It was actually really fucking hard to narrow this list down to 5, but I did it. However, I won't be putting them in a particular order as last stands are very subjective things. First off is the epic last stand / sacrifice of the entire Astral Knight Space Marine chapter in order to destroy a Necron world engine. Necrons have some pretty bullshit hack weapons. Nothing encapsulates this more than the fact that they had a literal Death Star. The Imperium sent fleet after fleet, over a dozen Space Marine chapters to engage the engine to no avail. Its shields were too strong and its weapons were carving up the Imperials like sashimi. So the Astral Knights decided that their massive balls could be of good use. They rammed their battle barge into the world engine with the entire chapter on board. Battle barges are sturdy beasts, so it was able to break through the shield and more or less act as one gigantic drop pod. Over 700 Astartes survived the ramming and charged forth. Their sole goal was to destroy each and every Necron node, forge, and bit of technology that they could find. They fought for hours, being cut down one by one until eventually only a handful, including the Chapter Master, remained. In his final act, the Chapter Master detonated a melter bomb charge on a central part of the world engine, disabling its shields and primary weapons. What? This isn't fucking Star Wars, you can't just blow up one thing and the entire Death Star explodes. Necrons aren't dog shit engineers. However, losing their shields was enough to allow the rest of the Imperial fleet to bomb the ever-living tits out of the world engine, destroying it. Every single Astral Knight that assaulted the engine died, but they saved the Imperium from an extremely large ball ache. The death of an entire chapter is extremely rare in 40k, as A, it's a permanent change to the setting, even if a small one, and B, it fucks over people who paint their chapters in that scheme, so GW is usually such a huge pussy about it, often allowing 100 or so Space Marines to survive to rebuild the chapter. However, this time only about 30 Astral Knights remained, the ones who had stayed behind on their homeworld. However, instead of letting them rebuild, a new chapter arrived at their fortress monastery and kicked them out, telling them to go sacrifice their lives in the Emperor's name. A bit of a dog move, but the Astral Knights do go out and do die for the Emperor, making them officially extinct. Overall, it's the sheer sacrifice of an entire chapter, the odds they were up against, and the acts of heroism that puts the Astral Knights' last stand on this list. The devastation of Baal was basically one big-ass last stand. Every single Blood Angel and all their successors, minus the Lamenters, versus the largest Tyranid fleet in existence and Khorne's greatest champion, Kabunda. But I don't want to look at the entire conflict today. Instead, I want to look at the last stand of the Knights of Blood that took place during the war. The Knights of Blood were a very controversial chapter. They were officially deemed renegade traitors by the Imperium due to them going even more berserk in battle than the Flesh Tearers and killing just as many allies as enemies. They still considered themselves themselves loyal to the Emperor, hence did not join Chaos, but they are overall still enemies of most of mankind. Despite this, they still answered the summons of the Blood Angels to defend their homeworld. They were so insane in combat that the only chapter that was happy to fight alongside them during the war on Baal were the Flesh Tearers. Together, they held the line on one of Baal's moons against the Nids. However, when Kabunda arrived, it was clear that the defenders were going to be overwhelmed and needed to withdraw. However, a full rout would mean all of their deaths. So, the Knights of Blood, led by their chapter master Centaur Jewel, decided to give up his entire chapter's lives to allow the Flesh Tearers and other chapters to escape. They charged the enemy, with Centaur even charging Kabunda and confronting him. Kabunda mocks the chapter master, calling him a weakling and attempting to corrupt him to Khorne. Centaur resists and laughs in Kabunda's face, telling him that Kabunda is the weak one, allowing himself to get baited into a pointless duel with a space marine, thus allowing thousands of other Blood Angels to escape. Kabunda rages, Centaur charges, and embraces an honorable death. Redemption is a big theme within the Blood Angels, so the Knights of Blood embracing a horrific death against demons and Tyranids to save their brothers is a pretty solid way to bury the sins of their past, especially since they were the most Khorne and Berserk-like chapter in all of the Blood Angel successes. Overall, a last stand in every essence of the phrase. I have a bit of a soft spot, nay, a bit of a hard dick for the Custodies, so I always try and mention them when I can. Fortunately, they have a really badass and emotionally charged last stand, even if it did end quite badly for them and was unremembered by all. When Lorgar was being a bit of a shithead simp, the Emperor sent a squad of Custodies to watch over him and ensure he wasn't doing anything naughty. Spoiler, he was. However, the Custodian Aquilon and Argyll Tal created a pretty unexpected but powerful friendship, becoming brothers in arms and very close. Argyll was the only wordbearer that the Custodies liked and trusted, so it was a brutal betrayal when the Custodies discovered that the wordbearers were traitorous heretics and had played them for a fool. While the wordbearers were on Isfahan massacring the Loyalists, Aquilon and his small squad rampaged through Argyll Tal's ship, massacring servants, soldiers, and even assassinating the Blessed Lady, someone Argyll cared for deeply. The Custodies then crash-landed on the surface of Isfahan, with Argyll Tal and his Gal Vorbak close behind. They catch up to them, 3 Custodians versus 11 Gal Vorbak. Not the greatest odds for the Golden Boys. It was a pretty intense exchange, with the last time Argyll and Aquilon seeing each other they had been close brothers. Now Argyll was a drooling demon and Aquilon wasn't having a bar of it. Despite the number disadvantage, the Custodians having already killed hundreds of troops, a super battle robot, and crash-landed on Isfahan, they still made a good account of themselves. They killed 4 of the Gal Vorbak before the first Custodian went down. Then another Gal Vorbak went down before Argyll killed Aquilon himself. This left 6 Gal Vorbak versus 1 Custodian. This last Custodian had taken a vow of silence for decades. He removes his helm and throws his spear, impaling and killing another of the Gal Vorbak. He begins to laugh, breaking his vow as he says, "I always hated you, Zaphen," referencing the Marine he killed with his final act, a Marine that also happened to be Argyll Tal's best friend. It was a very emotionally charged scene. Argyll had been the main character for the entire book, and this scene perfectly showed off that he really just was an evil piece of shit like the rest of them. He tried to tell Aquilon about chaos and the truth of the universe, but Aquilon just said, "Shut the fuck up, you retard. You have no valid arguments. You are a drooling half-demon traitor. Everything you say is worth less than the splashback of cum on a horse miniskirt." That isn't exactly word for how the convo went, but you get the idea. Isfahan is a bit of a trigger word for Loyalist forces, not just because of the drop site massacre, which saw the deaths of almost 3 Loyalist legions, but also because of the Isfahan atrocity, where the Loyalist elements of the traitor legions were expunged. But whilst the original plan was basically just to virus bomb them all, instead, due to the heroics of a few, it resulted in the Loyalists engaging in one of the most epic last stands in the entire setting. See, Sol Tarvitz had discovered the traitor's intent and flew down to the planet to warn his brothers. As a result of that, around 60% of the Loyalists were able to find cover in bunkers and the like. That equated to tens of thousands of warriors. When the traitors learnt of their survival, they were just going to bomb them again, but Angron had a bit of a stiffy for some battle and charged them directly, hence begun a multiple month-long war where an outnumbered, outsupplied, and primarchalist collection of Space Marines from the Emperor's Children, Sons of Horus, World Eaters, and Death Guard were able to repel and kill thousands of enemy traitors. Even as they were whittled down to their last few numbers, they still led counterattacks and countercharges to frustrate the enemy. They were killed to a man, men, but each of them died a legend, a hero, spitting in the face of Horus and his traitors and defying to the last. The last scene is literally Sol Tarvitz and a few hundred or so battle brothers surrounded by thousands of traitors, refusing to surrender. It was the first conflict of the heresy, and it really laid down the vibe and theme of what was to come. Overall, just a lot of awesomeness. And finally, there is no last stand quite like the Siege of Hell's Reach. That in itself is an entire video that I have already made, but I really wanted to focus on the very final battle of it, the most last stand of last stand possible. For context, Hell's Reach was an important city on Armageddon that had come under siege by a massive orc army. Reclusiarch Grimaldus of the Black Templars, as well as 100 or so of his brothers, and a large guardsman force, as well as some titans, were tasked with defending the city. Sounds pretty generic until you actually read the lore and see the amount of absolutely off its nuts acts of heroism and gigaballs that took place to keep the city out of orc hands. Long story short, the Black Templars are killed one by one, the titans are brought down, and most of the guardsmen are killed. In return, hundreds of thousands of orcs were also massacred, their gargants and mega gargants brought low, and all that remained were a few thousand. Grimaldus, his handful of remaining warriors, a few sisters of battle, and the last few guardsmen set up a last stand in the city's central church. They hold the line as the enemy they had been fighting, bleeding, and being bled by charged in. Guns roar, body parts fly. One by one, the final Black Templars die. The sisters are killed, each one taking down a score of orcs with them. Grimaldus is surrounded, butchering orcs as the very chapel around them collapses, burying everyone in rubble and officially ending the Siege of Hell's Reach. Not many orcs were alive, and the Season of Fire had begun, a horrific weather event that basically meant you weren't allowed to siege anymore. Grimaldus survived the cave-in, being one of the few survivors, alongside a couple extremely lucky guardsmen. I'm sure as you can see from the animation that was playing, this last stand was badass as fuck. It's not often Space Marines, especially the weaponized autism ones like the Black Templars, have emotional moments, but this chokes me up every time. Even though the scale of this last stand wasn't massive, the build up to it was. The months of campaigning, victories, defeats, kills, and wounds had all led up to this brutal last stand, and each and every Imperial Defender, Space Marine or not, took it without flinching. I honestly believe it was Hell's Reach that brought a lot of people over to the Black Templars, making them these badass, lovable, and kind of relatable warriors. Either way, in my opinion, the best last stand in the entirety of Warhammer 40k. If you enjoy the video and you want to support the channel, then Patreon is the place to be, where we've just uploaded the best ever nude cosplay photo shoot with a stunning model for only $1, so I'd definitely check that out if I were you. Hit the subscribe button and hit the real subscribe button for more very epic content. Join the Discord for more memes, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.